Welcome back to another Monday market movement, Monday market analysis, whatever you're going to call it. But we're going to look at the Pokemon market today and we're going to look at some cards in the market. So we're going to start off with looking at the Persian from Shrouded Fable. So Shrouded Fable is an interesting set, I guess, because it's one of the last few sets that's still in stock in places for retail price, in particular in the US. I know that they're struggling with a lot of stock levels, but Shrouded Fable is not the best set, shall we say. Objectively not the best set. But Persian within Shrouded Fable is probably the hit, if not second top hit. I had a massive price hike a few weeks ago, nearly a month ago now. And as you can see in English, it's actually started to tail off, which is really interesting. It's sat in that sort of 60-ish dollar range. I mean, if you wanted to buy it right now, you are going to have to pay more than that. But market price is sat at 60. However, we look at the Japanese one, it has tailed off as well, but it's tailed off at peak, so it's not dipped back down. The comparison for this, I guess, is the fact that this is not available to buy. So the actual price point you're going to pay for the Japanese card is probably going to be a bit higher than that. You would probably have to go to eBay, or you would have to go to somewhere direct in Japan. It's a really interesting one. It's one that I bought a few of in one of the risking money in Japanese cardboard videos that you guys would have seen in the channel. Um, it's for me, I just thought it was really strong artwork. It was sitting in the sort of $3 to $4 range, I want to say, maybe less. So it was a bit of a no-brainer. But it's just interesting to see the fact that it has started to tail off. And I guess what can you learn from this is just buying Pokemon cards right now at peak prices is really risky. Like, I'm personally not buying cards if they've done anything like this. I just can't see how those kind of numbers are going to be sustainable. And personally, I'm just a bit more risk adverse than that. Then we're going to touch on this Braviary, who I've got two of sat at PSA, and it was one of the hits from Surging Sparks. I guess it was particularly cheap at the start. As you can see, it was like $4, really, really cheap. And it's been on a massive growth trajectory. So I've got two of the English ones off, and I've got a few of the Japanese ones off as well. I mean, I think it's a great artwork. Do I think it's a $17 card? Probably not. But I guess in this current market, who am I to say anything about that? So we're going to keep an eye on this one over the next couple of weeks as well, just see if that growth trajectory continues. It has got a slight tail off here, but you can see there was a couple of tail offs in between it as well. So it's not to say that it won't continue to rise. The Alolan Dugtrio as well from Surging Sparks. Super interesting one. You can see this one's been a bit of a different journey. It's definitely not that same trajectory that we saw on the Braviary. Market price is sitting around that $11. For me, I think it's quite a cool artwork. It's a bit different. I think it's going to have the same longevity as some of the other arts? Probably not. But I guess from a risk standpoint, you can see at least it did tail off. It's gone back up. It's gone back down. So you're probably sitting around where you would expect it to stay. Maybe $10 seems about fair for this card. I mean, if you wanted to buy it right now in TCG Player, you're looking at $14. If I move on then to the Pikachu EX, now this is one where I actually don't have all the details on it, because I don't know if this is actually playable, and that might be why it's getting skewed. That's something that you guys can let me know down in the comments down below. The reason I'm looking at it is purely from an art perspective. Again, I've sent this off to PSA. If you wanted to buy it right now, you're paying $9.40. Market price is sat at $7.80. It started off really high, dropped down low, and it's going back up. So you guys will need to let me know if that's because it's playable. But the graph is very interesting on that one. The Latias as well, this has seen a real strong resurgency. It started to dip a wee bit, but considering we were down in the sort of below $2 mark at one point, market sat as $3.30. Again, I've got one of these off at PSA as well. I just think, to be fair, with a set that focuses on Latias and Latios, how could the regular Latias EX not do well? For me, it's going to be a card that will do well over time. And then the big one, the Latias EX. Again, another card that I've got off at PSA. And if it comes back at 10, I'm going to get hit with some fat fees. But super interesting here, because you can see it sort of dipped into that 220, 230 region. And then it's gone up to that 250s, where it seems to be sort of settling. It's maybe slightly increasing. Where do I imagine this will sit? Personally, I don't see why this is weaker than the Pikachu. I understand Pikachu is a more popular Pokemon, but I just think this is a much better artwork. So for me personally, I could see this one doing particularly well. I know in a 10 it is very punchy price-wise, so we'll need to see. Hopefully mine will come back next month. Also, I must admit that I do have a cold as I'm going through this, so apologies if I sound particularly funky. We're going to look at the Ceruledge here. This is one you'll have seen me chat about quite a lot. Again, I do have one of these English ones off PSA just now, but I also have a bunch of Japanese ones off and have more Japanese ones ready to go. This one saw a really strong and sharp increase all the way until the start of Jan, and then it sort of dropped and then it started to increase a bit and it's kind of tailing off. But even at a market value of $37, for me, that is still steep for a regular art rare. Like, this isn't an SAR or anything like that. Again, I do think it's a strong art. I know it's popular, but borderline $40 does seem punchy. So it'll be really interesting to see where that stands. Would I be buying at $40? Personally, not. The Japanese one I'm buying for like $4, and for me that's a much stronger deal. It's the exact same artwork, it's like a tenth of the price. Then we've got the Latios. Now, this is one that I personally find really interesting. Artwork wise, it's not too dissimilar from the Latias. The only difference is a regular art rare and the other one's a SAR. So rarity wise, the other one is rarer. But this is why I've been buying a bunch of this in Japanese as well. As you can see from the graph, it dropped down to about $35 what's that, a couple of weeks after coming out, and ever since then it's been on a, I mean, if you average that out, it's pretty linear increase. Don't get me wrong, it's had a couple of drops here and there, and it looks like it's on a drop at the moment. But market set at 43, the cheapest you could buy is 45, so $43 market value, maybe £38. You're basically buying that for, I've been buying them for maybe £5 to £6, so probably just over 10% of what the market value is in English. So from that perspective, again, it's really interesting. We'll keep an eye on this one over time. Personally, between that and the Latias, both of those are going to do well over time, in my opinion. I think they're really strong artworks, really popular Pokemon. Then we have the Feebas, and I am pretty certain I do have this at PSA as well. I think this was one of the ones I did pull. But that growth trajectory there is punchy to say the least, and it's not probably one that I expected. I don't know if anyone else has any insights as to why it's been so strong. Again, don't get me wrong, I think it's a good artwork, but ultimately it is just a fish and some leaves. I know that all art rares have kind of been shooting up, and it's probably just been the case of the market, but you're looking at the last 3 months, it's gotten up 112% here. The market value sat at $16, but the cheapest one in TCG, or there does appear to be $16.50. Let me see what that is. So it's light played. So your cheapest new mint is $18, which is quite punchy, you know. But it's a cool art. Again, price rise is helping me. I am interested to follow this one. I'm not sure if that will hold over time, but we'll need to wait and see. The new tins that the Pokemon Center released, those, what is it, the Dialga, the Palkia, is it Dialga, Palkia? No, it's Dialga, Kyogre, and someone else. They have Surging Sparks in it, so it'll be interesting to see what that does to the prices. Another one was the Mesprit. I did think this was criminally undervalued at the time, and especially in Japanese, it was incredibly cheap. I think I was buying them for like $2 or $3 a card. This has shot up significantly as well. Despite tailing off, you're seeing 130%. But just because it was Mesprit and it was sat at $6, it just didn't make sense to me. I actually wish I'd bought more of them, both in Japanese, and I wish I'd picked some up in English. I just didn't have the capital sat ready at that point in time. We bought as many as we could in Japanese. I don't think the seller had any more at the time. But market sat around $16 here. The cheapest is $20 if you were to buy it on TCG Player at this point in time. Again, I think it's a really strong artwork. Surging Sparks, art rare. Can't really go wrong. Would I be buying it $20 given this? Probably not. However, it's definitely one we're going to keep an eye on over the coming week. Then we've got another card that I've got off at PSA, which is the Drayton SAR from Surging Sparks. Look, right, it's an SAR, it's a trainer card. Do I think it's going to be the coolest thing in the world ever? No, trainer cards personally aren't my favourite to grade. I'm purely grading it to increase the value and sell on to buy things that I do like. But in terms of growth trajectory, it is interesting. It has risen, just not significantly. I mean, we're looking at like 8%. But for an SAR within that set, it's definitely on the cheaper end. Market value sat around $17. Cheapest to buy on TCG Player at the moment is $32. I think somewhere in that £20 region is probably pretty fair for it, given rarity and given the way it looks versus, I don't know, I'd much rather have a Latios or a Latias. The fan pay then, interesting growth trajectory here as well. I think all these art rares were pretty criminally underrated from Surging Sparks. I did buy a few of these in Japanese. You've got the fan pay and you've got the Dawn fans. It's kind of giving African Sahara vibes. The market value sat at that $11. Cheapest to buy at the moment is $15. You've doubled in value. Anybody who picked up here is absolutely laughing. Again, it did just look like it was too cheap. It's just interesting. We'll need to, as we monitor this over the coming weeks, we'll just need to see how these sort of trajectories carry on, because I cannot imagine that it's going to, every 3 months it's going to double in value. There's just no way. So we'll see when that starts to tail off. One of my favourite art rares from Surging Sparks is this Execute, which has actually seen quite a dip after a massive surge here. But even after the dip, you're still plus 150%. So market value sat around that $11.50. Cheapest to buy at the moment is 12, but that's probably lightly played. So your cheapest near mint 17.60. It's giving tennis ball cracked vibes. It's quite cool. Roller skates there. I mean, I'm personally a big fan of it. I think a lot of the other people are a big fan of it, hence the price surge. But it'll be really interesting to see how that does over time. And you guessed it, yeah, another card that I've got off at PSA. The Clobopus for me was one of my favourite artworks in the set as well. I know I'm going to say that a couple of times now, but I thought it was a particularly strong one, quite different, very cool, and it was incredibly cheap when the set first came out. As you can see in that sort of sub $4 range, anybody who bought in at that is laughing because it's gone up 137%. The growth trajectory looks to be continuing. It makes sense that the steepest part of growth is when you've got the highest volume there, as you can see with the different bars and the lines overlapping. Market's at 860, cheapest to buy at the moment is 1250. To be fair, I could see it being a £10-12 card. Like, I don't think there's an issue with that, given how interesting the art is. Did I buy any in Japanese? I don't know if I did, but I think they were really cheap. So maybe it's worth having a look and seeing what the Club of Puss in Japanese is sat at this point in time. We're going to revisit a couple of the cards I looked at last week. I think part of my plan with this series is, whilst we're going to look at new cards or new sealed products, I also do want to revisit some of the same ones just so we can see how the trends are continuing. And unfortunately for our good friend Sylveon here, the downward trajectory seems to be continuing. Maybe we've got like a slight uptick here or evening out, but definitely still on that downward trajectory. I mean, market value is 470, the cheapest to buy is 900. It's just not something that I'd be touching at 470 personally. But if you evened it out, are you going to pack one within 50 packs? Probably not. So in terms of that, if you wanted that specific card, it's definitely still better to buy it for that £400 range than it would be to buy 50 packs. The Espeon here, however, is still going on that growth trajectory. So it was last time I was talking about how there doesn't seem to be a correlation between the evolutions and how they're all performing. You've got some that are going down, some that are going up, but the ones that are going down continue to go down. The ones that are going up seem to continue to go up. So if you did buy the Espeon, it's sort of low. I mean, it did rise very quickly, but you are laughing. It's up 35%. Market value sat at 430. The cheapest available is 900. Very hard to get a hold of. Then the Leafeon, and that actually has started to sort of even back out or maybe increase ever so slightly. You've got a slight increase there, but the sales volume is very low. Market value sat at 370. Again, the only cheapest one's 900. Somebody's obviously having a good time there. Mr. TCG Worldwide Pro is having some fun. But for me, that's one of the coolest artworks in this set. Again, you could look to Japanese cards if you wanted to buy them a lot cheaper. I know they're in that sort of £40-50 range, some of these, so definitely a lot cheaper in Japanese. And then one I really wanted to highlight, because you guys will have seen I bought a bunch of this in Japanese. This guy has seen an absolutely monumental increase here. In the last month, it's gone up 30%. But if we look at that particular spike there, I mean, February 19th, 180. Then it's sat at 220. Market price now is 223. Cheapest to buy is, again, Mr. TCG Worldwide Pro at 800. But do I think that's a £300 card? Personally, look, if that did rise more, I'd be very surprised if that ended up being a $300 raw card. It would not, in this current market, it wouldn't surprise me. However, if it was to be sustained at $300, that really would surprise me. Again, I think it's really sick, but I have a Japanese copy live in the UK right now for £24 or £25, and it hasn't sold instantly. So you can buy the Japanese very often for 10% of the English cost. So would you rather have 10 really sick Japanese cards or one English card? And for me, it's quite an easy decision most of the time. This one here, then we've got the Ceruledge EX, the SAR, and it's personally I prefer the AR rather than the SAR, but growth trajectory wise, it's been really strong. It's gone up nearly 45%. Anybody who bought at that dip at 150 is having a really good day. $240 market. Do I see that being sustained? Potentially. I don't know. It really depends on how Ceruledge as a Pokemon continues to grow, because I know it does have a big fan base, so it'll be interesting to see what happens over time. The Raging Bolt, again, another one I wanted to highlight because I've bought a bunch in Japanese. That growth trajectory doesn't seem to be stopping. It seems to be maybe leveling out at the top there. but even then you're talking 54% increase in only a matter of weeks. So really strong performance there from our good mate Raging Bolt. And then I wanted to showcase the Iron Valiant as well, because when I talked about it last week, I said that it would be kind of evening out, and it does look to be increasing again. The artwork's pretty strong. I don't think it's as strong as the others, but still nice to see it increasing. However, it's still minus 31% since the start. Then looking at the Japanese, so my boy Salmons, who I've bought a few of, unfortunately seems to still be on the growth trajectory. However, it is sold out currently on TCG Player, so if you bought at the start, you are minus 34%. When I've been buying it for circa £40, which is probably around the $50 mark. So I have been paying roughly market value. Maybe by the time you add on import fees, it's above market value, but if I get 10 back from PSA, I'm pretty comfortable with that. So this is a surprising one for me. It's not what I would have expected. I obviously, if I thought it was going to be on a downward trajectory, I would try to wait until it bottoms out. But then we've got Ends Reshiram, which has also seen a downward trajectory. This was probably one of the more hyped cards, and I guess these trainer Pokemon cards, it'll be interesting to see how they do. There's some mixed opinions on some of them. I know that the new Cynthia's Dragonite has got a lot of hype behind it for the next set, but there's some mixed opinions, and clearly Ends Reshiram shows that downward trajectory here. The Articuno, after bottoming out around that sort of, what's that, $11, $12, it does look to have had a slight increase and then slightly leveling out again. So it'll be interesting to see where that lands. I reckon that could comfortably be a £15 to £20 art rare. If we looked at some of the art rares earlier, for me, this versus the Serial Edge, this should have more legs to it, because again, it's a Gen 1 Pokemon, should have a bigger fan base. It's just that it hasn't come out in English yet, so I would imagine that the English version of this will be more expensive than the Serial Edge, but this is Japanese only for now. Then the Wailord, which I think has started to pick up a bit of a momentum in the market. You can see there's been quite a significant volume of sales here, 186, and it has started to increase ever so slightly. It looks like it maybe has tailed off as well, but it's increased from the bottom anyway. So market value sat at 650 if you need to buy it right now, 7. So going up ever so slightly. I think it'll do well on a PSA 10. I would love to get one of these graded, and I might do that with Ace. I reckon they'll probably have a really good Ace label for this. So maybe that's one I'm going to play around with very soon. I wanted to touch on the Espeon in Japanese, because if you looked at that trajectory we saw in English, it was just pretty steep and it was going all the way up. Whereas in Japanese, it hasn't seemed the same. So as you can see, drop, then increase, then drop again, and now it looks like it's leveled out. So market value sat at 73. You can buy for 73 just now. Obviously, quite a bit of shipping involved there. But in terms of versus English, you're sort of paying, what's that, roughly a fifth or a sixth of the cost. So it's actually not as cheap comparatively versus other Japanese cards where you're paying about 10%, but it's still significantly cheaper. And the 10 rate on these, I think, is really, really strong. The Sylveon is the complete opposite. So you had that English Sylveon, which was just going down and down and down. And the Japanese Sylveon seems to be, it looks like it's maybe on a slight downward trajectory again, but it's roughly where it was at the start, which is really interesting. So if you look at the Japanese versus the English, you're looking at about a third of the cost, whereas some of the other cards are about 10%. So quite interesting to see that disparity there as well. The Leafeon, very similar trajectory to the Espeon. Kind of had it went for a big spike, and now it is above where it started out. So it's just interesting to see how the Leafeon, whilst it's coming down significantly in English, it does seem to have gone back up in Japanese, maybe tailing off slightly now. Market price at 82. You can buy just now for 90. Then the Roaring Moon. So this is where things get interesting for me. So you've seen that massive growth trajectory in English. It does look like it's on an upward tick for Japanese, but definitely not the same rate. It's down versus peak. So peak was sort of what, $30 or $40, late 30s, early 40s. Market price at the moment is sat at $32 in the US, all sold out. Do I think it's going to rise significantly? Maybe. But do I think it's going to rise at the same trajectory as English? Probably not. Still interesting to see. Then Raging Bolt, again, this is a really interesting one where you've seen that start growth trajectory in English. Maybe it's starting to tick into the Japanese here ever so slightly. You can get some indicators that the graph is going to go up. Market sat at 18, you can buy for 19 just now. As you know, I bought, I think, 8 of these, so I'm heavily invested into this. Then the Latios, we looked at the English earlier. The Japanese has also shot up significantly, so I was buying in around $7, $8. We're now sat at that sort of $11 mark. If you bought when it first came out, it was sat at early 6s. You're talking 67% up. Market at $11, none available to buy. Really, really strong artwork. Can only see it doing well over time. And then last but not least, I wanted to touch on the Braviary in Japanese. because you guys have seen the growth trajectory in English, and whilst we are seeing a tick here in Japanese market is sat at $2 according to TCG Player, I do think that's a bit tight. I think you can't even really get it for that from Japan. So I think $2 is underselling it, but even then you're talking plus 30% to that $2 mark. It's probably more in that $3 to $4 mark now. But either way, it's just interesting to see how the Japanese and the English sort of cross paths or don't. I just wanted to end this video off here, so thanks a lot for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel. Let me know down in the comments what you think of the different market movements. What are you buying at the moment? What are you selling at the moment? And also make sure to follow my whatnot in the description. I will be going live later today on it for the first ever time. So I'm going to have $1 starts, I'm going to have ripping ships, and I'm going to have buyers giveaways. So do make sure to click that link in the description, and you can use my referral link. If you use the referral link, you will get £10 to spend for free on whatnot. So thanks for watching, guys, and have a good day.